look like a floating head, you know, I've got no hair. I'm just on a black screen. There's my hand. What's going on?
We'd recorded quite a few demo recordings, and I started to talk about whether she'd ever consider writing. She said she's not sure about writing songs, but she's written a lot of poems. She knew full well she'd been writing songs, but they were very personal songs.
And that's a clip from Amy, which is the new movie from Asif Kapadia. Asif, good afternoon. Welcome to the show.
Afternoon.
Very nice to see you again. So you came on the show for Senna 4 years ago. An astonishing movie. We talked about it for weeks. It must have opened a lot of doors for you. But after the success of Senna, how long was it before you knew what the next subject was for your next movie?
It took a while. I was doing a few different projects. I did a film for the London Olympics, and I was developing movies and screenplays. And then actually it was a producer of Senna, James K. Rees, who called me up again and said, look, I've just had a message from someone at Universal Music saying, would you be interested in making a film about Amy Winehouse? And James was intrigued. He called me up and said, what do you think? And I thought, actually, this could be it. I don't want to do another sport film. We had lots of offers to do sports films. And it was the right subject, which had enough layers, it felt like. I knew her music, never met Amy, never saw her perform live. But I'm a North Londoner. And there's something about the local girl aspect, the fact that it felt like it was going to be a film about London. But also, I suppose I had lots of questions. So just lots of questions about why things panned out the way they did, which, in a way, I wanted to figure out while making a movie.
I remember when we were talking about Senna, if I've remembered this right, you're not a particular Formula One fan, so therefore you came in completely fresh to telling that story. So perhaps the fact that you hadn't met her and you hadn't been to her concerts was a plus, really.
Yeah, I find just generally making movies about things I don't really know that much about. It's much more of an interesting process. I figure it out as I'm going along. It's like an education. It's like you do a degree in a subject, I suppose, in the amount of time you spend on a film. But there's enough to intrigue. There's enough there. I like music. I'm interested in music, but it's not like a subject I know everything. With Senna, it was interesting because there were lots of books about Senna. There were lots of films about Senna. There was an expert on our team, Manish, who knew everything. With Amy, there was no expert. There was nobody that seemed to know everything. There was nobody that was around the whole time. And so the big difference on this project was we had to become that expert. We had to do all of the research. We had to connect all of the dots to try and understand who was who. And because generally the groups didn't talk to one another. And so that was a very different process on Amy.
There is a similarity to Senna in as much as there are no talking heads. We see the story told through camcorders and home movies and news footage and phone footage and selfies, and that kind of thing. How do you work out what the story is going to be, Asif? Do you compile all that material and then from that decide what the story is, or do you do the interviews and do it that way?
I guess there are 3 stages all going on at the same time. The first stage is just to start getting our research team, archive team going, just to pull whatever they can from the BBC, from, different performances you did, different concerts, and just see what's out there. And then generally you'll see, oh, that's an interesting interview. It'd be great to see more. So then you figure out where's the original source. So the archive team, led by this guy called Paul Bell, who's, again, it's the same team that made Senna. So by then we kind of have a kind of system of working. So they'd go off and research. I would be doing interviews, meeting everyone and anyone, just one by one, a very long list, working my way down a list to try and understand what was going on close to Amy. Who were the people really close to her in her band, her management, her family, friends, everyone. And then the third stage is the editor would come on board and start putting it together to try and create a storyline. It felt quite early on. Once it becomes apparent how brilliant her lyrics are, that became the spine of the movie, because that seemed to be Amy at her most eloquent was in her writing. And I guess I knew she wrote her songs, but I wasn't really that aware. Everyone goes on about the voice, and it was the songwriting that really stood out to me this time. So really, it's 3 things are going on at the same time. For me, on this project, the interviews were probably the most important part of my job, because there was no story, there was no agenda, there's no script. So literally, I just start by talking to one person, and that person would lead to another 2 people, and etc. One interview may last an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, 15 hours. There was no idea. Nick Szymanski, the first manager, was really the person who opened the door. He had never really spoken to anyone before. I met with him. He didn't think it was the right time to make a film, felt it was way too soon. But he did say he really loved Senna when it came out. He saw it with his girlfriend at the time, and he did say, walking out of the cinema, wouldn't it be great if someone made a film like that about Amy one day? The emphasis being on one day. He thought maybe in 10 years' time. So when I contacted him, he said, it's only been a year since she's died. It's way too soon. Leave her alone. And so I met with him. And once he started opening up, he actually couldn't stop talking. He had to talk. He had to get it off his chest. And I think that became the routine. Everybody was very wary, very angry, a lot of guilt. But once they started to talk to somebody who wasn't in the business, wasn't part of the circle, didn't really know what was going on, didn't have an agenda, they felt much better afterwards. It became a bit of a therapeutic process, really.
Some of the voices we haven't heard before, certainly I hadn't heard before. I can't remember hearing from her mother. And some of her earliest friends who you got to speak and are clearly very upset while they are speaking to you. Did they need any kind of persuasion and reassurance about how this movie was going to pan out?
It took a long time. I mean, the friends, probably took... Nick opened the door to Juliet and Lauren, her two childhood friends, and he said, they're going to be awkward, they're going to be tricky, they're just like Amy, they won't behave themselves, but you have to talk to them because they know her. They were there right at the beginning, they know everything. Probably took 6 to 9 months to get them to talk, text message, set up a meeting, the meeting gets cancelled, another meeting gets cancelled, and then eventually they'd meet. Very emotional, very, very emotional meetings. The process is very much like what we're doing now. It was a microphone on a table, the two of us or three of us in a room, no one else, a mixer in another room, no cameras. The lighting was really harsh, so I used to turn the lighting really low. So we pretty much sit there in the dark talking. Just start at the beginning and just see where we get to, whatever they want to talk about. And it was really the first time they'd spoken to anyone outside of the inner circle about the whole situation around Amy. So it did get very emotional. There were a lot of tears, a lot of pain, really.
The movie seems people will have their own personal response to it. I don't think the movie blames anyone particularly because it's sort of too late for that. There are a number of things that you can point to, but I want people will have read the response of Amy's dad, who is clearly upset about the direction that you took. And we do hear Amy saying, "My dad was never there." We do see him turning up in St. Lucia to visit Amy with a camera crew. Obviously, Rehab was her most famous song and has the line in it about, I ain't got the time, and if my daddy thinks it's fine. Do you understand why Mitch has reacted the way he has? Were you expecting that almost?
I guess there's a point in the making of the movie where James, the producer, and I were walking down the street looking at you going, are we going to make this film? What are we going to do? Because we know where this is going. If we do make the film and if we are as honest as possible and all of the research is pointing in a certain direction, there's probably going to be a few people who are not going to be very happy. People are going to get upset. What are we doing? Why are we making this film? And in the end, I guess it came down to the fact we're making the film because, one, we were asked to make the film and we were very clear at the start. We're only going to make this film because we're going to be very honest and try and reveal. Everybody knows how this turned out. There's nobody who doesn't know how it ended. It didn't end very well. My question from the very beginning was how and why. So we're not trying to point the finger at any single person or people, but actually it's a bigger picture. It's far more complicated. There are so many different levels at play. Amy had lots of issues from a very young age, which I didn't know about. Then she makes decisions herself along the way with her career, with her relationships, which lead to, they turn out a certain way. But I do feel it was very clear from the material and the research that certain people around Amy did make decisions along the way which maybe were not best for her when she was in a bad way. Maybe they were helping their own situation or their own careers. And I think we had to show that. And because of the nature of the film, because of the research we've done and the fact that it's made with archive, it's really apparent. You can see it all. It's all there in the material. It's not an opinion that I've got. It was all there. And there was lots of this sort of material. So the film is really like the essence of what we found. And we felt we owed it to Amy, really, in the end. That was the clue is in the title. We're making it about her, and we owed it to her to show what a complex situation she was in.
I think you're right, everyone knows the story, and I was trying not to fall into the trap of thinking this is all inevitable, because it would be easy to tell a story that, it was always going to end up like this. And it wasn't necessarily. And there's a moment in the movie where she's won the Grammy, and her record company have said to her, you have to be clean or we're through. and she gets clean. And she's fantastically successful. And then there's a moment, when she says, and it's boring. It's boring without drugs. And at that point, I think there's something that happens. Okay, this is going to be bad.
Yeah, I think we found that over and over again. Whenever there was a kind of a happy moment, a light moment, you thought, okay, this is a chance, this is an opportunity. It always, unfortunately, seemed to be undercut by something else. And it all goes back to there were issues that were just there from very early on, which were not maybe dealt with, or if they were going to be dealt with from what experts have told us, the sooner you try to deal with them, the more of a chance you've got that they may succeed. But yeah, that's one of the kind of highest moments of her career, which actually is really undercut in a very, very sad way by the fact that she just feels she can't enjoy it anymore. It's no use. What's the point of winning all those awards? It doesn't mean anything unless you're on something, or in her case also with somebody who's in prison by them.
There was a similarity, I thought, then with Senna, that I remember feeling towards the end of Senna, as he approaches the last race, get out the car. Get out the car. Everything about this feels wrong. Stop now. Get out the car. And in the last half hour of your movie, I'm thinking, leave these guys. Stop hanging around with him. Go back to these friends, these close friends who you spoke to for the first time. Get with them. You'll be fine. And you know that that she's not going to do that. But that's
get out of Camden was one of my things.
Yeah.
Leave London. For me, it was also get away from these people, but also maybe that area and that town. There's a point. I love London, but there's a point you need to get out. I think she needs to get away. There's so much more in the world, so much more to experience than actually staying in the same place all the time and actually becoming a recluse, which is what she became.
There are just a couple other points that I wanted to bring up. I think it's fair to say that comedians and chat show hosts will feel uncomfortable in this movie, amongst many other people. It's like a side order of stuff, really. But there are some quips there from chat show hosts and comedians making jokes about Amy, which, given the trajectory of this story and cut into the movie the way you've done it, makes for very, very uncomfortable viewing. And I wonder if there is that sense of there should be more responsibility. If you're making jokes about someone who might not be very well, maybe back off. Maybe don't use that because it's a cheap joke.
I mean, I think that's what we found. It became so easy. The easiest gag in the world was to make a joke about Amy Winehouse. And that sequence could have been half an hour long because it was every comedian around the world was making jokes about Amy. I've met journalists now who've interviewed me for the film who said they knew Amy at the time. And, they'd have a Halloween party and they'd all dress up as Amy Winehouse. You didn't have to think about it. You just made fun of her. And she never answered back. Obviously didn't have litigious people around her. Nobody seemed to be protecting her. So it was a no-brainer. Just make fun of her. And I think that's where the film changes slightly, where it very much so opens up and it becomes about the media, it becomes about the paparazzi, it becomes about comedians who we all love, and lots of people that we really like, primetime TV people or really edgy people, but making fun of someone who we can now see is mentally ill. And then the audience who love it, who are laughing away and paying tickets for it, or going to watch her when she's really messed up, because that whole thing of, she might die, let's watch her before she dies. There's a really weird thing that happens as a complicity that went on with the audience and with the media and everyone. Somewhere along the way, we forgot there was a kid in the middle of this who wasn't very well and maybe wasn't being protected very well, but also everyone else jumped on a bandwagon.
You mentioned just at the beginning of the interview, Asif, that you didn't particularly know her, you weren't particularly immersed in her music. Now that you have been, and you've probably stopped and moved on to other projects, there is a glory to her voice still in this movie. There is lots of Amy Winehouse singing, and in complete contrast to her speaking voice, she's one of those artists like Elvis Costello who doesn't sing the way she speaks. But if you just want to witness again, of course it'd be laced with tragedy, but just the glory of that voice, it's an astonishing vehicle, isn't it, that you've got there?
I really love her singing live. That's what we've got pretty much in the film. It's pretty much all live performances. Amy picking up a guitar. I don't even know she played a guitar. It's the simplicity. It's really raw. It's really simple. It's really pulled right back. It's really pulled right back. I find the album actually albums maybe feel a tad overproduced when I hear her raw voice singing. She's really funny. That's one of the things I love. She's so intelligent. She's really funny. And the kind of the writing comes out because we put the actual lyrics of the songs up on the screen. For me, it became a thing like going back to vinyl, the old days of buying LPs. And if I loved a record, I'd read the lyrics and I'd read where it was produced and who performed on it, and all of that. I just wanted to kind of highlight the writing as much as the voice.
Yeah. What's next for you, Asif? What's your
I'm doing a
network?
drama next, so I'm in the middle of post-production on a drama, crazy film that we've shot out in the Caucasus region, and then I'll figure out which doc to do next. James hopefully will call again with another project.
Asif Kapadia, we appreciate you coming in. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now this caught my eye because when I was on the radio doing the film review show on 5 Live, which I do with Simon Mayo, somebody wrote in and said, can I take a 6-year-old to Jurassic World? And I said, well, really, no. 10 seconds into the film, I'm literally 10 seconds into the film, I leaned to James King and I broke the code of conduct. I whispered to him, I hate this film. I just, all my alarm bells went off and I thought, it's okay, but maybe it will settle down. But no, it didn't.